Chapter 1 of the Marne. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Elizabeth Klett. The Marne, A Tale of the War, by Edith Wharton. Chapter 1. Ever since the age of 6, Troy Belknap of New York had embarked for Europe every June on the fastest steamer of one or another of the most expensive lines. With his family, he had descended at the dock from a large, noiseless motor, had kissed his father good-bye, turned back to shake hands with the chauffeur, a particular friend, and trotted up the gangplank behind his mother's maid, while one welcoming steward captured Mrs. Belknap's bag, and another led away her miniature French bulldog, also a particular friend of Troy's. From that hour all had been delight. For 6 golden days Troy had ranged the decks, splashed in the blue salt water brimming his huge porcelain tub, lunched and dined with the grown-ups in the Ritz restaurant, and swaggered about in front of the children who had never crossed before, and didn't know the steward's or the purser or the captain's cat, or on which deck you might exercise your dog, or how to induce the officer on the watch to let you scramble up for a minute to the bridge. Then, when these joys began to pall, he had lost himself in others, deeper and dearer. Another of his cronies, the library steward, had unlocked the bookcase doors for him, and buried for hours in the depths of a huge library armchair, there weren't any to compare with it on land, he had ranged through the length and breadth of several literatures. These 6 days of bliss would have been too soon over if they had not been the mere prelude to intenser sensations. On the 7th morning, generally at Cherbourg, Troy Belknap followed his mother and his mother's maid and the French bull up the gangplank and into another large noiseless motor with another chauffeur, French this one, to whom he was also deeply attached, and who sat grinning and cap-touching at the wheel. And then, in a few minutes, so swiftly and smilingly was the way of Mrs. Belknap smoothed, the noiseless motor was off, and they were rushing eastward through the orchards of Normandy. The little boy's happiness would have been complete, if there had been more time to give to the beautiful things that flew past them, thatched villages with square-towered churches, in hollows of the deep green country, or grey shining towns above rivers, on which cathedrals seemed to be moored like ships, miles and miles of field and hedge and park falling away from high terraced houses, and little embroidered stone manors reflected in reed-grown moats under ancient trees. Unfortunately, Mrs. Belknap always had pressing engagements in Paris. She had made appointments beforehand with all her dressmakers, and, as Troy was well aware, it was impossible at the height of the season to break such engagements without losing one's turn, and having to wait weeks and weeks to get a lot of nasty rags that one had seen by that time on the back of every other woman in the place. Luckily, however, even Mrs. Belknap had to eat, and during the halts in the shining towns, where a succulent luncheon was served in a garden or a flowery courtyard, Troy had time, as he grew bigger, to slip away alone, and climb to the height where the cathedral stood, or at least to loiter and gaze in the narrow crooked streets, between gabled cross-beamed houses, each more picture-bookishly quaint than its neighbours. In Paris, in their brightly lit and beflowered hotel drawing-room, he was welcomed by Madame Le Buc, an old French lady smelling of crape, who gave him lessons and took him and the bulldog for walks, and who, as he grew older, was supplemented, and then replaced, by an ugly, vehement young tutor of half-English descent, whose companionship opened fresh fields and pastures to Troy's dawning imagination. Then, in July, always at the same date, Mr. Belknap was deposited at the door by the noiseless motor, which had been down to Havre to fetch him, and a few days later they all got into it, and while Madame Le Buc, pressing a packet of chocolates into her pupil's hand, waved a damp farewell from the doorway, the Pegasus motor flew up the Champs-Elysees, devoured the leafy alleys of the Bois, and soared.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?